All right. Today, we're interviewing Miles Loftin. So, a little disclaimer on this. Me and Miles are business partners. So, we do know each other. Miles was my first tenant and roommate when I bought this house.
Yeah.
So, we've gone back a long ways. But oddly enough, Miles, during this campaign, we haven't talked that much. We kind of have a little separate lives.
Yeah.
I've been working
blending.
Yeah, I've been working on my master's plumbing. We talk maybe once a week. We did go to the old folks home.
We did. Well, the Grand Center.
Geez, gotta edit that out. Yeah, we went and talked to the olds over there. We got some good feedback, but we just wanted to clear some of that out of the way. And it's kind of good. I'm glad we get to actually talk, even though ballots are just issued and all that, because there's some things we've talked a little bit of politics, but it's funny, we haven't talked a lot about some of our things. So we can dive right into it. I think some things today. One of the first things I want is, I've noticed with your campaign, you want to kind of be appealing to everyone.
Correct.
Okay. Who don't you appeal to?
Oof.
I don't know. I came out
hard
swinging
hitting
on
from
that.
the start. Yeah. I had no clue what to expect, so this is good. So I have really tried hard to make my platform as universally appealing as possible. Not so much to appeal to everyone, but because I think that there are some really common sense and wide-reaching things that we can do to really help our community along that I think play nicely to a variety of groups of people. I think, frankly, I think the parties that would have the hardest time with me are people who are benefiting from the housing market being as difficult as it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of my main points, is trying to drive the price of housing down, whether that's renting or purchasing or otherwise. And I think we need that to maintain the community that we have and to be able to, have a full community where we have people from all walks of life actually living in town. And so I think anyone that is making a considerable amount of money or benefiting in one way or another from housing being contested and expensive might not resonate with my platform.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I kind of think everyone from the people who build the houses to the people who need to live in them should like my housing platforms.
Well, I think there's a ways to make money and build affordable housing. People,
Oh, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's not that...
You're saying rent-seeking behaviors and...
Yes. It's not that there isn't a way to, build affordable housing and make money building affordable housing. In fact, that's a big part of what I want to encourage as we build housing is I think there's a way to build a home in Moab that will go on the market at $300,000 or $400,000 and still make money off of that home. Also without completely cheaping out on the build process, so that the person who eventually purchases the home is still purchasing a quality place to live. I just think that, if anyone doesn't benefit from my campaign and what I'm doing, it's someone who would not want to see that kind of home on the market.
Yeah, because one of the things that just came out recently was the endorsement of candidates. And, we have a kind of funny field where there's 3 people running for 2 positions. So it's not like you're running against anybody, but the Republican Party just issued an endorsement, and they didn't endorse you or another Republican candidate. And I thought that was interesting. I thought they would endorse anybody with the R by their name. Why don't you, did you not reach out to the Republicans? What? Do you consider yourself a Democrat? What's up with that?
So first and foremost, while I don't consider myself a Republican, I don't consider myself a Democrat either. I've always felt that my politics are firmly independent. What I found interesting in this race, because as a first timer in this, there was a lot of learning. There was a huge learning curve in who to talk to and who makes the decisions for these endorsements or otherwise. And I found the Democratic Party to be the party that reached out to me and wanted to know who I was, what my politics were about, wanted to dig into how my politics as an independent would help their party lines. And eventually they chose to endorse me because enough of my platform aligned with what they're trying to get done in town. And I provided contact information to several people within the Republican Party, and I got almost zero engagement. And I went to events. I went to Curtis's kickoff party because I wanted to support both of the mayoral candidates. I went to the one of the Grand County Republican Party meetings in order to just kind of shake hands and see a few people. And I was really curious that my outreach didn't even amount to an interview or an interaction. Because what I was really looking for is, I don't totally know if the platform that I am pitching is something that the Republican Party aligns with or not. Again, my platform is mine alone. I'm not trying to build it along party lines. But I was just very taken aback that I didn't even have the option to plead my case or to interact.
So you didn't feel like there was any outreach on that. So yeah, and like, you have like met Lynn Jackson. Do you know who he is?
Certainly, yeah. I've met Lynn and AJ both, and I mean, AJ was one of the people I provided contact info to, and I was like, hey, I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to see how your policies align with, or how the things you want to see in the town align with the things that I want to see in the town. Yeah. And I mean, I think there's a lot of common ground. It's funny in the sense that, like, we build things, right? And right now it's remodels and stuff like that. But I would think that certain things like incentives for affordable home building and incentives for developers to come here and build the housing that we desperately need would be something that would be attractive to the Republican Party. I would think that even though I talk about water, I think a lot of people see it just from a conservation perspective, and that's there. But also, the state has already started to ask the county to begin justifying developments with some amount of water sets to them. Mm-hmm. And soon enough, we're going to have to do that in the city. And so my interest in conserving water isn't just, to hoard it away, but it's to make sure that we can continue to grow and not run into large problems, moratoriums or otherwise, with our water usage, being a restriction on development. Mm-hmm. And I think prudent policy centered around that kind of thing makes sure that we can still have that part of our economy. Mm-hmm. And part of me just thought that would be kind of a universal point there.
Yeah. One of the things, you're the youngest candidate. You're the youngest at some of these Republican and Democrat little get-togethers. You tend to be one of the youngest people there.
Certainly.
I noticed at your election kickoff, some of us older Gen Xers were like, we don't know a lot of these people that have showed up to your event.
Yeah.
Tell me about, I just kind of want to know about your corner of Moab, right?
Okay.
So we talked to Jason. He's plugged in the schools, right? Sure. And I think, we have a town of 5,000, and when you look at that, I feel like people can know about 500 people. And so that's, 10 subsects of 500. Like, what's your 500?
Well, I mean, so I think a lot of who I was when I first came to Moab was that outdoor industry guy, specifically the climber. Working for Pagan Mountaineering and working in a climbing shop, I got to know a lot of people. And I got to integrate myself in specifically the climbing community. I know a few of the base jump community, and I know a few of the slackline community, but I was never as close with them as the climbers. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, I've also, I think it's outdoor people in general, like the river community, the climbing community, the folks that run some of our outdoor retail stores and some of our guide shops. And, I started coming out here when I was a kid and tagging along with Desert Highlights when Matt Moore owned it. And I was like their little token kid when I came out here on spring break, and I would run around and I would help them with things and carry rope, and I was just so excited to be part of that world. It was so enchanting to a small kid. And I've kept those connections. It's like so recently we had a movie night there was kind of a get out the vote event over at the climbing gym, and Britt and Kai at the climbing gym have been amazing supporters, particularly considering like their business doesn't necessarily fall within city limits, but everybody in Grand County kind of knows that like we're a one city county, and so a lot of what happens at the city affects a lot of the people living in the county, even if they can't vote for it or even if they are not directly governed by it.
Yeah. Our apologies to the residents of Floyd, by the way. So I just see kind of your group of people. Like you got a lot of these like 30-year-olds.
Yeah.
Right? Like I look at we've got like the old miners, you know, and then like I was on the Great Mountain Bike Wave. So you know I'm looking at a lot of these younger guys and girls and I'm kind of like, what are they doing here? And are they making roots? Are they voters? You know, we talked about like, oh, it's hard to get the young people engaged. Do they have housing here? Do they live here? Well, I kind of see it. I was like this mass of younger faces, and I'm like, I'm like, oh man, I'm getting out of touch. I don't know these kids.
And I think
are they retail workers? You know,
I think a lot of the people that I bring to these events and that I interact with are the people who came here in their 20s to just explore and work a service job. And a lot of them are now deciding to stick around, and they're figuring out where they fit into the community. So they're becoming voters. They're becoming business owners and managers rather than just the kid at the counter. And honestly, like I see it as a group of up and comers, so to speak. Like I see it as there are a lot of 30-year-olds out there that in the next 10 years are going to become the people who own the businesses that drive our economy. And those are the people I'm trying to represent in a big way, because frankly, I'm one of them.
Yeah.
Right? Like I like my personal experience in Moab started with exactly that. Moving out here in an RV and, living through the rough winters and exploring and, slowly deciding, well, I wanted to live here more permanently. So let's, rent a room in a house and, moving on from there to now, still being a renter, but having my own space. Yeah. And now...
What do you think it takes for somebody to... Like, I see all these people... Moab's always had people come and go. And it seems like some people stay, some people leave. And I think about why I stayed and, why other people have stayed. What's that secret sauce? And what makes people stick around? Like, what is it?
So I think it's community, opportunity, and stability. So the community is what makes you want to stay, right? Like everybody comes here for the rocks and for the location, and plenty of people.
I fell in love with the landscape.
Well, and plenty of people vacation, right? Exactly. Yeah, it's the old cliched line. But like plenty of people vacation here, spend a couple months here, whatever it happens to be. They're on their like summer of self-discovery, and they leave. And those people are the people who don't get tied into the community. And then you have a group of people who come here and they begin to get tied into the community. They make friends, they build connections. We are a really varied and welcoming space, and it allows a lot of people to build a connection here. But then for those people to actually stick around, like I see those as like I know some people who are still doing the van life thing, right? But they've been back here for like 6 or 7 years running. And they spend the whole of season here working. They, they're old friends, they're old faces that I see over and over again, but they don't actually live here in Moab, or they don't own property here in Moab. And so I think to get the year-round people here, it's two things. It's stability and opportunity. So why people stay, or why people leave is maybe a better way to put it, is often a lack of opportunity or a lack of stability, in the sense that if you're working, counter service at one of our local coffee shops or whatever, like that's a fun job for a summer. That's a fun job to come back to if you're traveling around. But for someone to want to stay here, some amount of like growth, like personally and and in regards to their job or their career, is necessary. And then some of it is just, I've met people who have found a good job here, and who are maybe like, working for somewhere where they're using their degree, or, they see upward mobility in their employment and they're excited, but they struggle to find housing. I mean, like the city and the county are perfect examples of that, where we have had very qualified people here and that we have hired them and we've been excited to have them, and they've ended up leaving because they just can't find a sustainable place.
Well, like, what do you think? You said in a lot of things there, and one of the things is what, you talked about a good job, right? And what do you think makes a good job?
I think two things make a good job. I think not living paycheck to paycheck makes a good job, which is a moving target if I've ever seen one here in town. And I think the potential for upward mobility makes a good job. I think people are more willing to invest a significant portion of their life, time, and effort into employment that will reward that. I think it's funny, I was just this morning reading an article about Costco's business model and how many other like large retailers will cut down on staff benefits, cut down on staff pay in order to make the like profit margin they want to hit. And Costco kind of threw that out the window and made a point to invest in its employees and provide them all like a really nice healthcare plan, start people at $22 an hour. And I've got a friend from high school who I recently it's one of those friends where like you see him every 5 years, and last year he got married, and I had seen him about 5 years ago, and when I saw him this year for his wedding, I asked him, what are you doing for work? And he's like, well, I'm still working at Costco. And so that was like 5 or 7 years now of him working for them. And he's like, honestly, I have a great benefits package. I know that I can continue moving up into management. And even though I never really quite saw my life as, doing this type of job, the way they treat me has made me feel like it's worth sticking around. Mm-hmm. And so,
yeah, I just, we have so many, and me and you have both worked retail jobs, and it's kind of viewed as like, well, it's the stepping stone. It's low paid. It gets you into Moab.
Sure.
And I guess I just kind of struggle with that. Like, okay, we have a bunch of summer jobs, and that's just it. But, with what you're saying with Costco is like, you can turn a job that may be considered like a stepping stone into that. And there's pathways for it. I
Certainly.
guess, like,
provided ownership sponsors
because
that.
You've jumped out of the retail world.
Yeah.
You just didn't, tell me about a couple things here before we go into that.
Yeah, let's go.
I think you're probably the only candidate that doesn't own their own house.
I believe I am, yes.
You're the youngest. You're the rental class. You're a renter class. You're also probably I'm guessing maybe the poorest.
Oh, without a doubt.
You make the least amount. So it's just kind of like, I enjoy your perspective. Like with politics, sometimes that's rare. So you've decided to kind of go for, like, let's talk about you going for it, right? Like you got out of the retail world. What kind of made those decisions? And tell me about where you're at.
Like a little bit of background on me and what made me go for it and all that. So, I came out here to do like retail and to guide. I've done canyon guiding, I've done river guiding, I've, worked retail. And frankly, honestly, a lot of that was born from some aimlessness out of college. Mm-hmm. I was convinced I wanted a career in the medical field. I got an EMT license right out of high school, and I was determined that I wanted that. I cared for my grandparents, my grandfather through his passing, and my grandmother after that, and it kind of like, it changed some of my perspective on life. It changed some of my perspective on how I wanted to practice medicine. I really value our medical professionals in this country. They do a very hard job. It is thankless, and you take a lot of it home. And I didn't know if I wanted that. And so I kind of had this crisis where I was like, I don't know what to do with my life. My whole life plan through college is something I've decided I don't want, and I don't know what to do otherwise.
But you kind of like, I think you kind of hit this point, or tell me about like why you didn't choose like, the standard American path, go to college, get a better job, get a higher paying job.
Well, yeah, so part of that too was caring for my grandfather and realizing that like he saved a lot of the life experiences he wanted to have until his later retirement. And then, my grandfather, like, so he worked as a butcher, he worked as a bank security guard, he served in World War II, like, he lived a rough and tough life. And some of the stories he told me about growing up as a kid, riding on horseback, hunting elk off horseback in northern New Mexico, he lived a rough life. So when he got older and he was retired and he could do all of the things he wanted to do, his body wasn't up to task. And he spoke a lot about that, especially like near the end. And so when I went through that whole experience, I realized like I wanted to do some of the things I had always dreamed of doing and pursue some of my like wildest like physical feats and all of that when I was young and when I could and when when my cartilage worked the best. And so that's why I came out here. And I didn't really ever plan on staying in Moab. And so my transition into doing what we do now really came from just a few random opportunities. I mean, so I had done this kind of work back in college to like help make ends meet. So like tile setting, like odds and ends handyman work, construction work, and it was just a way to like make ends meet. It was, I also I worked in theaters and I built sets and stuff like that. Like where I learned to weld was welding for like theater companies like that, because honestly it paid pretty well. It was kind of a fun job and it didn't have the same fixed schedule as like a coffee shop job. And so when I was here in town, I got the opportunity to help Brian with Canyon Voyages. Just doing like, essentially it was cosmetic work, but it was all the metal in that building when he purchased it for Pagan Mountaineering to move into. He, wanted some help and he offered me a wage that I was like, oh my God, I've never made this much money before in my life.
And you were also working retail. So the discrepancy between those two is, let's go into that.
Well, and it was always skills that I had. So retail was easy and it was fun and it provided for the lifestyle that I wanted to live, right? Like I made just enough money to be able to, rent a cheap room and get out and adventure as much as I could.
And the deal on gear, that's always
deal on gear and like low stress.
Yeah.
Like retail, I didn't take a lot of it home. Like even, there was a point where I kind of moved up and I was helping them buy products. And so I had to have a greater understanding of like what was selling and what kind of stock we had and make sure that I was up on the inventory and that I made sure that we like reordered when we needed it or whatever. But still, really low stress job. And so when I, clocked off, closed up for the night and locked that door, I didn't have much to worry about except making sure that I got the finicky lock to shut all the way. And that afforded that kind of fun lifestyle that I was looking for. And so, I mean, it was kind of a point in my like mid to late 20s. I think it was 27 when I really started doing this kind of stuff, which was like, I knew I wanted to get serious. Like I had done the fun thing. I had done some of the cool experiences, and I'm not saying they're over by any means, but I wanted to be more serious about my life and, pursue a more stable lifestyle. And so that's really where the contracting came about. That's where, like, I started with this project. I was like, wow, there's money to be made in this town like that. And more importantly, like, other people saw my work and said, hey, I need this done at my house. Like, I have been having a heck of a time finding someone to help me with my house. And so then it was a moment to, like, get serious and figure out, okay, like, how do I actually legally own a business? How do I create an entity, get the appropriate licensure? And that has all grown into what we have now.
And what do you think, okay, so money, you're saying that money is a source of stability.
Certainly.
I would think that you're going to say housing. Housing's like, huge, right? Like if you don't, one of the things I think we find with our business is, we get the mail delivered here at my house instead of yours, because who knows, you might move. And even though I'm working one day a week for us, I still get the mail here. what do you think? What do you think? Business, like young entrepreneur, what do you need from the city?
Well, so a lot of the things. So I've talked to a couple people who have started other businesses here in town, and like one of their greatest hurdles is if you are a renter, you have to go through extra approval processes to own a home business because, of course, you're operating a business out of a property that you don't actually own. That's also part of why this is our address. And there are some significant hurdles there in regards to making sure that you can get all of the state and city paperwork to line up and actually get a business license issued. Mm-hmm. And I think, money and housing are inextricably tied. And one of the main things that I think is important to note is I think like when you look at rents in this town, like when you look at people who are paying $2,000 to $3,000 a month in rent for a house, which is really what it takes to get into like a decent functional home without roommates. Like that doesn't like in a salary of $60,000-$70,000, which is still above average in this town. That's like I think it's $80,000 is the.
Got 3 minutes, just so you know. Sorry.
I think $80,000 is the cumulative household income for two people. If
you're talking about area median income.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, which is still not enough to make.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. If you have two people who collectively make $80,000 and you're paying $2,000 a month in rent or $3,000 a month in rent, like to start a business took significant capital. It takes a fair bit of money to get all this together, and especially when you're waiting for licensure, when you're waiting for permitting, it can be incredibly stressful. And if you don't have that capital, or if you don't have the ability to accrue that debt, then you're in a tight place. And when most of your income is spent on housing, then you don't have money to put away in savings to do something like this, and you don't have money, put away in savings to buy a home. And so that is why I really think like housing becomes the root of so many things in Moab. It's like if we want more businesses, if we want a more diversified economy, then we need to have people who are skilled at different things, whether it's trades or whether it's, business operation or otherwise. We need to have them come here to town, and then they need to be able to stay here for a reasonable cost of living, providing them that extra income to be able to do the startup that creates the business that then fuels our economy.
Yeah. So a thing we need to do is we need to talk. Shop Talk has been kind of taking off, and we have this week sponsors. Today's show is brought to you today by Left-Hand Turn Signals. Have you lost your mind when you're behind a car with out-of-state plates and waited 3 light cycles? Well, no more. Introducing Left-Hand Turn Signals with advanced turning technology from European countries like Colorado, Nevada, and New Mexico. Each individual intersection can allow you to pass without threatening life and risking your property. Try it today. Also, today's sponsor is Wag Bags. We all do it, but are you doing it responsibly? As the kids say, before you skibbity toilet outside, ask yourself, is this the right place to yeet a wild poop? If not, you need a Wag Bag. Wag Bags are great, and I use them all the time. In fact, I'm using one right now. In your Jeep, in your van, in your mountain biking hydration pack, on your portal edge during your 7th pitch, when all you've had to eat was Cliff Bars for the past few days, or even on that side hike on your river trip. Wag Bags are essential for any outdoor activity. And disposal is easy. The health department has provided receptacles around Moab for easy disposable, which I hear, Oscar, tell me if I'm wrong, that the employee month at Monument Waste gets to personally go collect. So get one today. It's fun and easy. So anyway, I had to throw those in there.
Who wrote those? Oh my gosh.
And we'll get to Left-Hand Turn Signals because I know
I'd love to talk about
that is a hill you're going to die on. A couple philosophical questions. Do you think that your retail worker that may not like you've taken this leap to go, ownership, all this, in one of these things is like housing's included. Who deserves housing and who doesn't? Like I think I've heard this and it's rubbed me the wrong way that certain people are like, well, not everybody deserves a house. And I've always raised my eyebrows at that. And, we talk about, you're kind of getting at what the magic sauce of functional communities are. And I not to go too far. I also want to get into some things more about the business, but
Sure.
like should housing for our low end employees just be like drywall, honeycomb places for the worker hive? Like I kind of have my thoughts on that. I just kind of want to hear yours.
Well, so, okay. I'm going to back up because that was a lot. So, who deserves housing? Everyone deserves some amount of housing that works for them, regardless. And that's one of the big things that I think is lost in the conversation about housing is a massive spectrum. Like, to me, it's like everything from the people coming here wanting to live out of their van and not even interested in an apartment or a rental space at all.
But do you think that's a function they want to live out of their van, or they just want to save money?
I mean, so I think it's a combination. So I'll break it down. But so we start with people coming here in a van or in a vehicle who may or may not actually want to live in a home, and then all the way to through the middle, you're kind of like, okay, well now our renters and our worker households, people who might just be as happy as with a drywall honeycomb, to people looking to grow, build a family, or otherwise looking for maybe a larger apartment or a small home of their own, to people whose lives or businesses require a little bit more space, property, storage, looking for something larger, to people looking for something that they're really intentionally building or living in to have a large family or have their dream home. And then on the other side of that is I know a lot of old folks who are looking to size down. They had the 5-bedroom house and they had a bunch of kids, and then all the kids are out of the nest, and they'd love something that's less of a pain to clean, and they'd like to size down into something to then for one of the biggest things when I was caring for my grandparents as they were aging and everything like that was when it was first starting to get rough finding assisted living for seniors and stuff like that. We've done some good things here in Moab for that, but we need that kind of housing. And so I think housing is this massive spectrum. And I think one of the things that a lot of people miss in the discussion of housing is a lot of what the guide community is, a lot of what these seasonal workers are. And I think there's a couple points that have been made to me that I think almost everyone misses, or at least everyone that I've talked about or talked to housing about in the political spectrum of Moab misses.
Yeah, what are they missing? I'm interested.
One of the major ones. A lot of people who come here and live in their vans are perfectly happy in their vans. They are doing it, yes, to save money, but they enjoy the traveling aspect. They really only want to be here for a couple months. It is the lifestyle that they've chosen for themselves. And that's not because we've shoved them to the fringes of society and they're simply not able to. If you offered those folks a home, outside of the financial benefit of being able to take it and sell it, a lot of people like living that lifestyle. And it's
funny. I'm 3 months living out of my van in Blanding, and I'm it's getting dark and cold. I'm getting over it.
Oh yeah, and most of those people flee somewhere warm.
But it's been nice, and then I'm
well, and most of those people flee somewhere warm. So one of the gentlemen that came to my movie night at the climbing gym, I was talking to him, and he's got a home back in Texas that he shares with his brother. He owns a house, but he spends most of his life in his van. Yeah. And he comes out here season after season. And
so he's providing a great service as he's giving labor, and he doesn't take up housing stuff.
And he doesn't take up housing.
I have thought for a long time we need to lean these are golden people.
Well, and this is so that was one of the things I was going to get to is I don't think we know how lucky we are to be in a place that's this beautiful, that attracts this many people. I mean, everything from our tourist industry being driven by people from around the world. Yes, we have plenty of U.S. tourists. We love our U.S. tourists, but this place is so special that people from all over the world, country after country, any one of us could travel and say we're from Moab, and you could be in Austria, and the chances that somebody sitting at that restaurant knew what Moab was, had thought about going there, or had been there, and pick almost any country. We live in an amazing place. And then we have this workforce that is people who genuinely just want to spend some of their time here, and they don't take up housing stock, and they're happy to work a lot of those entry-level style jobs. And
low stress.
Yeah.
Good
low
deals
stress,
on gear.
Exactly. Just like me when I was working, like retail for the climbing shop. It was about a fun, enjoyable lifestyle. And some of these people, like a lot of people are pursuing that and they're getting a kick out of it. And we, as the business owners and as the residents of Moab, like essentially get to reap the benefits of this really robust workforce that wants to be here, that wants to work, and that are happy to like take off and not make our town support them during the months where we don't make as much income.
Yeah.
And that's like the fact
I found my hardest thing. I've been homeless twice here, and my hardest thing was wag bag disposal.
Yeah.
I was like, things like that are like those people's needs. And like having that around town, I'm like, oh, that's great for the van lifers that don't have mobile toilets in their van.
Yeah.
I think about how sometimes small actions that the city, county governments take are like really impactful, right? Like having showers at the Mark, or not at the Mark, at the Aquatic Center.
At the Aquatic Center.
When I worked at Poison Spider, it was like, like we had employees who'd be like, one of the benefits of employment was like, oh, taking a shower at the bike shop. It was like, that was huge.
I have definitely done my fair share of the coin insert Poison Spider showers when I used to visit.
Right.
And so that's the thing. It's like, so I've talked to a lot of these kind of folks, about
you used
my
to be
campaign.
on and
About my campaign, and kind of been like, hey, like, Moab really benefits from this workforce. Like, what do you guys need from us? And it is literally that. It is like places to dispose of wag bags and like places that they know are safe and legal to camp. Like most people who van life don't want to sleep on the side of the road and worry about getting woken up in the middle of the night. Most of them don't want to sleep in a city market parking lot, and we don't want them to either, because like waste disposal becomes a big thing, right? Like you can't have people like without proper waste disposal just staying in neighborhoods and like peeing in people's bushes or something. Like that's obviously inappropriate. So, what we can do to support that kind of community is provide safe places for them to stay, provide appropriate places for waste disposal, for showers, for that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then that fosters this like amazing workforce that like pretty much like we all benefit from. I'm thinking about the businesses that my two other city council candidates run, and like both of those businesses absolutely benefit from people in vans, and we've been lucky enough to essentially start to benefit from people who are living here kind of semi-permanently, and then they have decided to stick around, and now we have great long-time employees.
Yeah, you feel like the trades and stuff is kind of a stepping stone out. Like you were saying, like, oh, this made a lot more money than working retail. Yeah. Is that kind of what drove you to be just like, okay, I'm doing this, or?
Oh, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, I've always liked working with my hands. I've always liked building things. Like I gain a sense of accomplishment from something done well. I gain a sense of accomplishment from like hard work.
Yeah.
Like there's just something about like working hard that makes me feel good.
Right. It struck me like you even went to a couple semesters of college.
Yeah.
Right. So like, it wasn't that like you weren't good at college, right?
No.
You got good.
No,
grades.
I mean, like I said, it was a huge like life crisis watching my grandfather pass and wondering like, am I really doing what I want to do with my life? Is this massive investment in time? Because of course, when you're getting into the medical field, like, it's not just 4 years of school. It is, pre-med, med school, residency, like, it is a long track out ahead of you. And I mean, for good reason, obviously. Yeah. But when I had that moment of like, is this really what I want to do with my life? Do I really want to dedicate the next, 8 years of my life or more to school and all of this, and what will I really achieve at the end, and how much debt will I be shouldered with by the end of it? That was really where I found the moment of like, okay, maybe I want to reset. And it's like, it's funny because I also did like...
Was it the commitment? Like, yeah, like,
it was a mixture of the commitment.
Yeah.
It was a mixture of like, it's funny, I almost always wonder if had I taken a gap year between high school and college, like if I would have reacted the same way. But I had just like, my entire life was school, and I was actually fairly good at it. So my entire life was just like school, and I built a whole identity around that. And then when that was like questioned, threatened by that time, and basically like when I wondered if everything I had been working towards was what I actually wanted, that was when I really tried to make a choice about like, what do I actually want in life, and try to find that out. So like I say, summer self-discovery when we talk about like a lot of people coming out here. That's kind of what it was for me when I was like 23 and coming out here. And so like, yeah, it's one of those where like I came out here in my early 20s because I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't know what I really want from life, and so maybe I'll like try to do something amazing, try to go do some of these physical feats I've always dreamed of doing, climb the rocks, run the rivers, and then kind of figure out where my life is going to lead me. And I mean, like personally, in a way, like I'd love to get back to housing, but I'll end this with saying like, you know, I have always kind of learned that like sometimes opportunities are presented to you and you may not know if you're the right person for them. You may not know if you're really up to the task, but you often are more capable than you think. And I have found, at least like what's led me into this whole business between you and I, has simply been me kind of like taking advantage of the opportunity presented. And now when it comes to this run for city council, like that's what this is at first I kind of had the reaction when other people asked me like, oh, are you going to consider running or otherwise? I was like, well, you know, like kind of who am I to represent this community? Like I'm just some guy, I like fix people's kitchens, you know, like who am I to do that? And it was my friends who reminded me, well, you know, think about how many people you know and talk to. Like think about how appraised you are of local issues, and you know, think about your time on planning and zoning commission and how much that has taught you about how the city functions. And you know, like think about how qualified you are, and then to see several or many people come forward and say, hey, I would like to have you represent me. And I kind of did the like, who, me? Like, no, me? You want me to represent you? And it's funny because now, you know, months into the campaign, I see it in a different light. I really do. Like, I have kind of come into my own and learned, like, yes, I do actually know a lot about what's going on.
Losing that imposter syndrome.
Yeah, kind of, exactly. It's like, I do actually, you know, like, I do actually have a...
Yeah, being on planning and zoning, I mean, that's most, like, one of the biggest levers that city and county governments have is local zoning.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And then, you know, so I just think you're in this interesting spot, right? Where, like, you know, you've made this leap over to business owner, wanting to be a business or a homeowner, which tend to be like, I think about like the Democrat and Republican Party, right? Like one side is the business community. The other side is supposed to be like the working man's thing, which has totally been blown up. I think, and there's realignments happening. What I think is interesting, I don't know if you share this view on me, but with me, but like I think that entrepreneurship is like, oh, we have a lot of like retail jobs. Okay, we've kind of established it's like they serve a point where they kind of flatline out a lot of times, unless you know, we're seeing companies like Costco step up their things. So you know, a lot of us have turned to like entrepreneurship, and I think that the city also plays a large part to do with entrepreneurship and fostering that. So,
certainly.
You know, what has your experience been with I know it's funny, when we were starting our business, you dealt with a lot of the setting up the stuff with the city. And I just remember being like, you know, everybody at the city was great. You know, they talked to us, they're helpful, but it was the structural issues with the city that's like, you know.
Oh, certainly. Hey. And that, I'll echo that. Like, you know, the staff was always helpful, and that was like the only thing that got us through it all. But there are so many like inconsistencies. I remember like having an issue with when we were getting our contractor's license, we needed, you know, like we needed our insurance, and we needed like a city business license in order to obtain the contractor's license. But then they wouldn't issue us the like essentially, like, the city wouldn't issue us a business license until we had the contractor's license. And because of one small line of text that read, like, that read in a certain way that made me think I needed the city business license first, which I didn't. Eventually, I figured that out. But it was like they had phrased it like, you need, like, city approval before the contractor's license will go through, or something like that. And I remember, like, going back and forth with you a bunch of times and being like, I don't really know. Like, this follows one into the other. Like, how does this work? And finally, like, we talked to Marcy and the treasurer staff, and they straightened us out. But I think a lot of that stuff, like, a lot of it's dragged down by, I also remember, like, we sent in my contractor's license to the state right before Christmas. And it was like 2 months before it processed because we still had to send it in a paper envelope with a paper check in it. And even now, like, you know, love the city building department staff. You know, they have been very good and efficient. But the fact that we're still doing handwritten business or like handwritten building permits, and you know, like I think a lot of things in regards to how business owners interact with the city could absolutely be streamlined. And
so you think as a counselor you can kind of put that perspective
certainly
in there, like, hey, I mean, that's why I'm kind of like, you know, I'm definitely on the pro-labor side, but I'm like, man, we need to have some pro-business if we're going to help people out of, you know, wage slavery. And so I'm just like, you know, these things are working class issues too, you know?
Well, and I've always believed that, like, entrepreneurship is like a test of a functioning society and economy.
Oh, interesting.
Right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Essentially, like, if you are able to start a business, like to define a need, right? Because that's really where you start a business. Whether you're starting a restaurant or a contracting company, you go, will the community need my service or use my service, or need my product or use my product? And once you define that need, then you start to build a business around it. And, like, you know, if you, like us, I found a need, you know, I did some of that work, and people started saying, hey, Miles, like, your work looks really good, and I can't find anyone to do this kind of stuff for me, like, you should go into business. And so I, you know, started to put together all the paperwork and otherwise and go into business. And, you know, and it's snowballed into this, and now we're we're well down that road. We are, you know, licensed general contractors. We're getting our, you know, P200. Like, I mailed the paperwork to the state, so soon enough that should be through. And to me, it is the test of a functioning society and economy, because if we are clear that there is a need for this kind of work, that we get plenty of it, and so if we cannot build a place for us in this community based off the income from providing a service that fills a need for the community, then there is some kind of economic gap in wages and in, like, cost of living in the community that is creating a discrepancy that is becoming burdensome to the community.
Well, it's kind of a failure of the economic system.
Essentially.
Like, the redistribution of wealth, which is through, like, wages and profit, is breaking down, which I see, like, you know, like Aspen's a perfect example. The billionaires replaced the millionaires replaced, you know, the small business owners that were the 100,000aires. And so, you know, like, I personally think that, you know, Moab we have that in the backdrop of everything.
Certainly.
So,
well, and I see Telluride even closer, right?
Oh, yeah,
To kind of go back to housing, like, I see Telluride even closer because, like, I have friends who live in Telluride and who work in Telluride. All of them live in Mountain Village, which is your honeycomb, you know, employee housing, or with the exception of 2 of them that commute in from Norwood or Red Vale.
Right.
And I was recently up there and just kind of wandering around town, and there was this little townhouse, you know, on a tiny little plot of land crammed in there, and it was, like, in such rough shape that the front door was kind of like, you know, the screen door was, like, hanging off the hinges, like, siding needed to be done. Like, in my head, I'm adding up a list of, like, you know, like, I can't look at a house without going, like, oh, okay, well, that would cost like that. Oh, so siding, that's like, a new roof, like, okay.
Yeah.
And so I'm adding up a bit in my head, and then I was with my girlfriend Shayna, and I was like, how much do you think that house is worth? You know, and we were laughing, and I was like, oh, I think it's like, $3 million. I bet that piece of property right there, even with that house that's basically a tear down on it, is worth $3 million. And she guessed 7. And then we looked it up online, and it was 12.
Oh.
And most of that, I'm assuming, was the dirt, because the house on it needed hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of work, or to be torn to the ground and rebuilt. But because it was a house in downtown Telluride, that's what it was listed at.
Yeah.
And that's nuts, even from just before COVID. In Telluride, houses weren't that expensive. But the thing for me is, that's what I see coming from Moab.
Yeah.
If we don't continue to foster, and that's the big thing for me. It's like, I like Arroyo Crossing, massive success. But what I don't want to see is everyone who's part of the working class here in Moab pushed further and further out of downtown. Houses downtown are getting expensive. Land downtown is getting massively expensive. And that is why I'm interested in things like deed restriction, particularly voluntary deed restriction, because that is a way that we can incentivize people to preserve housing downtown for the working class of Moab without having to force it on anyone. And that's like a lot of what I want to try to do.
We just have to forcing things don't work in America. It's incentivizing. And it's just, how do you incentivize that kind of thing? And one of the tricks has always been density. Yeah. Density is our for the county, at least with planning and zoning, density in large donations, like Arroyo Crossing being given to the community, which has an issue in its own. So.
Certainly. And density is an incentive, but there are other ways we can find incentives. I think there could be an kind of essentially an impact fee incentive. So when developers go to build housing, if it is going to be deed restricted, if they voluntarily choose to deed restrict it to a certain percentage or otherwise, maybe beyond AEH, which is the active employee housing that we already have, which requires a 30% deed restriction. If they wanted to, take 40% of the units or something, well, maybe we could give them a reduction on their impact fees or otherwise, which can be prohibitive towards development. I also think
a lot of nuts and bolts kind of thing.
It's like in the same vein, if you're a Moab local who already spent a bunch of money on a plot of land that you're hoping to build your own home on, if we could have a program that helped reduce some of those administrative fees when you're building your own home, because you can prove that you live and work in the community, or better yet, you can prove you've lived and worked in the community for a while. Yeah. That I think as many roadblocks as we can remove from, particularly from people getting into their own housing that is still essentially market rate. If we deed restrict something to be sold to so that it has to be sold to someone who lives in Moab, we're not restricting the rate at which it can appreciate. We are just saying at the time of transfer, the person purchasing it needs to be living here in town. And so I think that allows that to still be an asset for the person who buys it. It's still viable for the person who sells it, but it just makes it a little bit more achievable for someone who lives and works here.
Right. Yeah. Let's I have this opinion that Aspen is kind of like, you can look ahead at it could be a potential future of Moab. Telluride could be a potential future. There's these pitfalls that we can learn from those, because I can't live in Aspen. I'd like to think that I could live here in 30 years.
Telluride implemented a deed restriction program, but by the time they implemented it, there were very few houses available to even use it on, and there's so little developable envelope, just like here in town. There's very little space to actually develop, and so that became tricky for them. Aspen is one of the test pieces for the voluntary deed restriction in exchange for property tax reduction programs, and it has worked in Aspen. The criticism has been that it's expensive, and I think frankly, at the end of the day, if we want to make significant, meaningful change for the people of Moab, whether it's building the roads or whether it's preserving housing, none of it's going to be free.
Yeah, for sure. And so where I guess I'm going at is there's the Red Hot Chili Peppers song Californication, right? And it's we have Aspen fornication. Oh, there's that work. Aspenification.
There we go.
Monticello looks. I've been spending time in Monticello, and it's funny. Like Monticello kind of reminds. I was like, oh, there's a lot of like kind of granola crunchy people in Monticello, which blew me away. And a lot of them are like people that escaped Moab. I mean, we still got a lot of cowboys and stuff out there.
I have a couple friends that moved out to Monticello because they couldn't afford a house here, and they got married and they wanted to like be starting a life and building some equity, and so they moved out of town. And
San Juan County definitely. People down there are like, well, you got to really be careful. Do we want a Moab? It's kind of like Moab is being used as a brand against itself. In Salt Lake Tribune, they had an article on Richmond, or is it Richfield, about the new mountain biking trails. It's not Moab, and I was like, wow, like they're using our brand against us. But I want to back up the other way in terms of like, we got 2 minutes, let's take a break. So we were talking about how Aspen, is potential dark future of Moab, and Moab's the dark future.
And you were talking about how people were saying don't Moab Monticello kind of thing, and it's like that to me is a grave warning essentially, and a lot of also why I decided to get involved is I do think we are at a pivotal moment with this town, where right now we still have a full community. Like we've still got ranchers and blue collar workers. We've still got the people in the service trades. And we have not fully converted into a community that is occupied by the people who enjoy it. Like I look at Telluride, and most of the people who actually own a home in town are not like the business workers, the service workers, your baristas. They're the people, maybe the business owners. And of course, there's a few people who have owned family generational stuff. But I feel like most of the people who are in the town of Telluride are often the ones who are there to enjoy the town of Telluride. And the people who provide the labor for the town of Telluride live outside of the town of Telluride. Mm-hmm. And right now in Moab, the people who provide the labor for the town of Moab often live within the town of Moab. Mm-hmm. Now, a few people commuting down from Green River, and I've been meeting more and more of those people, and a few people living in Monticello.
Which is funny, commuting, for all this talk of sustainability, in lowering emissions and whatnot is a target for Moab. You take one commuter from Monticello, that's blowing that out of the water. And I think that gets missed by some people that look at, not to pick on Kalen. I remember I was digging a hole with Kalen because he had a water leak, mm-hmm. and we were talking about water heater efficiency. And I was like, well, if somebody has to commute from Willow Springs, those workers offset all the savings of every water heater in Moab is offset by the need to commute out. So I'm I think that's important. I'm not shitting on that, but I'm just kind of there's these bigger structural issues.
Well, and then again, that's also why that's why you don't necessarily hear me talking about a lot about that type of conservation. Yes, it is important to be reducing our emissions and stuff like that, but my conservation focus is water, because when it comes to emissions and stuff like that, we have so many pressures coming from different places. Okay, so the more people that have to commute in, the more that all of the solar panels we install, all of the high efficient water heaters we install are becoming offset by the commuters. We also and I participate in it, so I'm not knocking it, but we have a motoring culture here in town, and I'm into it. Whether it's the
Oh, you came in here on your motorcycle.
I showed up on my motorcycle, and I love to go out and ride, the dirt bike community, the UTV community, the Jeep community, the classic community that comes through town. So while I absolutely would like to work the town towards more sustainable fuel options and move away from these high emission producing things, I think it's it's like my argument with electric cars, which is they're neat, but one, they're still powered many times by the fossil fuel industry, and two, if you've ever looked into the nasty business of mining rare earth minerals that go into batteries, when you actually compare how environmentally friendly electric cars are, it's not the huge difference that you would expect.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when I look at a city council run and what like the next 4 years represents to me, it, like, if elected, a lot of it is like, you know, the resource I'm really worried about is water. You know, the conservation effort I'm really looking towards is water, because not only is that something that like is of greater scarcity here than our clean air, but it's also something that, you know, could make a massive impact. Like if we hit a place where we had true water shortages, where we were doing budgeting, that would have a massive impact on so many different industries in our community. Everything from like the hotels and stuff like that use a significant amount of water to wash bed sheets and otherwise, and it's a necessity. And, you know, to any development, you know, because if we're tied on water, like the idea that we would continue to build homes, businesses, hotels, you know, that seems ridiculous. And so why I care about that is it makes the most sense to me, while we are not in a squeeze, to begin prudent measures towards making sure 10, 20 years down the road, we are still
what
not
are the
in a squeeze.
like I kind of, at the county level, I feel like there's a couple arguments, and I don't really know that much about. I went to a lot. The county had a series of, and I don't know if it was even the county. I know Trisha Dean was behind it. I think you were at some of those too. You know, there seems to be two paths in Moab, and one of them is like we have plenty of water. We have so much water, we don't know. And then there's this other one that is like we are on the verge of mining our aquifer. We may have 1,000 acre feet left, and it's like I'm sure the truth is like, you know, what is. And I have, you know, we have a friend that measures aquifers, and she's like, it is very hard to measure an aquifer, though it is possible. And you know, I feel like it's in this moment of fake news and misinformation.
Yeah, well,
you know, and we're like this whole water debate. Like, I can't look at somebody and be like, we have infinite source of water, we have rights to the Colorado. And I'm like, do we? Like, we're ready to be like,
how much of the Colorado?
Stop watering cabbages in California, or stop watering people in Phoenix. These are the decisions being made, like food or people. And we're about to put another straw in that has, from what I understand, junior water rights, but I'm not an expert. So that's where I'm just kind of like, man, this is, you know, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting kind of thing. And I'm not an expert. All I want some like data from the state. This is why I'm like, with our planning and zoning, we're like, oh yeah, you got to tie development with water usage. Yeah, I see it's everywhere. And you know, there's starting to be accusations of like, well, that's, you know, that's just a hippie conspiracy, and these guys are just dummy rednecks that don't know anything, you know, kind of thing. So like,
well, and that's why, you know, the first thing I have to say about it is like, it needs to be a research driven approach. We had the USGS did a study a few years back. I think that study is 8 years old now. It was done in 2018, if I believe.
So you think we need to, like, we can trust those institutions?
So
without them, we're kind of like, what do we have?
Essentially, yeah, because like at the end of the day, expertise is expertise. Like, how do you measure an aquifer? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have the faintest clue. You know, like in my head, it could be anything from just like many testing wells that you're measuring at the same time to like, I don't know, some kind of ground penetrating radar. I mean, like, the funny thing is that's nonsense, because I genuinely have no clue how you measure an aquifer. Yeah. So I would absolutely put the measurement of our aquifer in the hands of people who spent years of their life studying how to do this. And whether that's the USGS or whether that's a private institution that we hire, you know, my only thought is that, you know, if I can't imagine the budget required to hire a private institution to study and actively monitor our aquifer, because I think that's the really big thing to hit too, is because I've heard different arguments, right? So I've heard everything from like, we have a ton of water in our aquifer. I think Howard, even during the debate, said we have 11,000 acre feet in our aquifer, and we only use 16,000, or we only use 1,600 acre feet a year. And like, that sounds great. All right, well, we have 11,000 and we only need 1,600. But it's like, if we need 1,600
I
every
view
year,
we need water for affordable housing. Like I am into water for development.
But this is my thing. Yeah. It's like, so if we only need 1,600 a year, well, if it's only refilling by 500 acre feet a year, then how fast are we going to go through that 11,000? Like, pretty dang fast.
Yeah.
And so, and all that's speculation, and it's speculation because we don't have accurate numbers. And so the main thing that I want to push with water is two things. It's that, one, we need accurate numbers. We need constant monitoring. And because our climate is obviously changing. I mean, this summer, how much rain did we get during actual monsoon season? Like, we've been lucky enough to have this hurricane hit. But, in the typical times that we get monsoons, we got nothing this year. And of course, that's going to have a delayed effect on the aquifer because...
I just think there's going to be arguments like, well, the Southwest has these like weird weather like it's hard to base climate change off of personal observation.
But there is still a measurable aridification of the Southwest.
So you're like, believe in our institutions. And this is kind of what...
I do.
We're gonna keep going on this. But I think there's this national trend. I mean, we're questioning all our institutions. And when I went to that water study with the USGS guy, he was like, I have no vested thing in here. I'm not like a radical environmentalist. You guys asked me to review these numbers. And I'm like, okay, I can't argue with that. But there is going to be a call of like, that's misinformation. Well, and I'm like, what do we do at that point? Like, what do we say? Like, okay, well, you're wrong, and we just need to outvote you.
And I think some of that's tricky because, like, a couple of years back, and I wish I remember who wrote it, but I read a an article that was called "The Death of Expertise." And it was a discussion of, in this information age, when we all have access to information at our fingertips, we are less likely to believe people who are authorities on a subject, because we are able to access so much conflicting information that is often not from a credible source. But it's hard for you or I to determine whether what is or is not from a credible source, because, like, I mean, it's one thing to, like, be able to tell when it's an AI video versus a real video. You can see in the corner where the, where the video doesn't quite match up or whatever. But
the 6 fingers.
But exactly. But the better the misinformation gets, the more of an expert in the information you need to be able to tell fact from fiction. And so when we don't trust the people who have spent years of their life studying something, when it's like the common joke, it's like if you look up your symptoms for almost anything on Google, like, it just tells you you're gonna die, right? Like you have a cold, you're like, I have a sore throat and I found a brown spot on one arm, and it's like, you're gonna die. You have
cancer.
And obviously, like, if you spoke to a medical professional about it, they would tell you that the brown spot was like a Hershey's Kiss from the night before that you fell asleep on, and then, you just have a sore throat and it's fine.
Taste it.
But it's so easy to, like, what I'm trying to illustrate is it's so easy to not understand the misinformation you're receiving and therefore come to false conclusions. So when it comes to, like, our water, bringing this kind of back, I think we need experts to evaluate the water situation that we have. I think that we are absolutely and undeniably in a period of aridification, and call it what you want. Our little piece of the desert is, as far as I can tell, and as far as the data supports, getting less water every year. And again, I'm not saying this is like, time to like throw our hands up in the air and move out of the valley or anything insane like that. But I think that we need to do the research, and we need to find credible people that we trust to do the research and determine what our aquifer looks like, how much water is going to be coming down the Colorado, and if, like, how expensive would it be to put in a water purification plant that puts that straw in the Colorado as you described. And then, like, I know
uses our wastewater, or
I know living through Albuquerque, doing that, that one, it was massively expensive, and two, our water quality went through the floor. And then just the taste of the water went through the floor. And so, like, it's one of those things where, like, yeah, okay, that's an option. I see it as a last case scenario. I don't want to spend that kind of money on that. Like, our tax dollars are precious. We only hang on to enough of them. So, like, that's certainly not something I want to see the city having to spend money on. And of course we could, try to, apply for grants or money from the state or the Fed and
but absolutely. I mean, it's definitely money that probably needs to be spent.
Yeah.
And it's just going to be a question of how much.
Well, but more importantly, it's like what I'm really driving at is how could we start saving water now without having to resort to like pulling water from the Colorado. Like if we can get an accurate picture of the aquifer, how much it's recharging every year, and how much and how much of a budget we have, and we can really do it like your economics class in 8th grade where they teach you how to balance a checkbook. Like you actually sit there and you go, okay, so if our aquifer is recharging,
is that information you feel available or no?
Like currently, no. Yeah. And that's what I'm getting at is we absolutely need to do those studies. We need to find an accurate way to measure the aquifer, and then we need to begin to budget our water within that.
That's the thing. I feel like I went to like water workshops, and it was like that information's like available, and then it's not, and then I'm so confused on it. I'm glad that the state stepped in and is like going to start mandating development with water things. I think that's the only way. I'm here for the state starting to make parameters for us to use. And so, this kind of, this is kind of the next thing I kind of wanted to go into is.
Well, so I wanted to finish with one quick point, which is simply like right now, there is a lot of question about that information. Whether or not we have it, whether or not we don't have it, I feel like the information I've been given has not painted has not painted a clear picture of what we're facing. So yes, we need to gather that information. But the other thing for me is we need to just pick some common sense water saving. Like even if we don't know how much water we have or how much water we need to save, what's wrong with saving some water now so that 5 years down the road, when the study concludes and we actually figure out how much water we have and how much water we actually can spend, that we've already begun to implement water-saving initiatives. Yeah. Like to me, using gray water, like the city came down with the landscaping ordinance, right? Which like I was a part of in planning and zoning, and we're asking people to save water in their own homes and in their own businesses, and so why the city wouldn't be willing to also pursue gray water or otherwise and save water in its operations. We all love the grass at the ballpark. We all want a green Swanee Park, right? Makes sense to me, but we don't have to use culinary water to get it.
Yeah.
And it would make a lot of sense to me, like to water the golf course. I mean, start with the golf course, right? That's already where the wells are. It'd be fairly, it would make sense to me to start with some of the bigger patches of green grass that the city owns in the valley. And water them.
It's funny about the golf course.
With gray water.
So from what I understand, I've worked out there, is they pump water from into these ponds. And I wish I could get into things.
Circulate it into the ponds.
Well, they get this water into their ponds, and I feel like it's like Ken's Lake, like Pack Creek overrun. And then they spray that water on the golf course, and then that fills up the aquifer. And so I feel like the golf course is this weird target where it's like, actually, I think the golf course, and it's all complicated. There's several. All I know is there's several aquifers. There's the Valley Fill Aquifer, Glen Canyon one.
And it absolutely could be. It's one of those things where I know that we're spending a fair bit of culinary water on watering grass around.
For sure.
And sure. If the golf course is offsetting some of that with Ken's Lake water or otherwise.
My only thing though is I have this argument too that where it's like, great, you don't want me to grow grass so I can build another hotel. What there's this thing where it's like, well, what part of the collective am I sacrificing for? Like a corporate hotel that's pumping money out of here. not to throw a wrench in the plan, but
sure,
you know,
but
there's people that say
could
that.
be, you know, you don't want me to grow my grass to support a hotel, but in the same way, that's you don't want me to grow my grass to support like housing for locals.
That's what
you know.
I
You
guess
don't want
I
me to
get
grow
at.
my grass to make sure that like our like, you know, service industry, our restaurants and otherwise don't have like, you know, the water they need.
Yeah.
Like I think that's like
I feel like water's like this resource that has to be. We kind of have it gets distributed, and that's the question of our national politics: is how do we distribute resources?
Yeah.
And is it just based? Because water's this thing where it's like, well, if only the wealthy get the water, like people are gonna die, right?
Yeah.
Like that's very. And then there's this like large mass of us, the people, and I'm like, dude, if you cut my water off, I don't protest. But I will barricade. I will erect the barricades in Center Street and like, you know.
Well, and that is, I mean, like as you said, you know, at the beginning of this whole conversation, like whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, water is like when you talk about like the true essentials of life.
Yeah.
Water's one of them.
Right.
And then when you build that into a whole like society and economy that we have here, like water is not just essential. Like, of course, we all need water to like drink, but we also need like, you know, the hotels need water to wash their clothes. The, you know, like any restaurant needs water for their kitchens. Like, you know, I mean, so many of us rely upon it in so many ways, and that's really like the root of what I'm getting at is we clearly don't have an accurate enough understanding of how much of it we have.
Yeah.
And like I would like love to be proven wrong. Like if they do a study and they find out like, you know, because I've heard similar things from we are already past our recharge budget, we're operating on a deficit and our day will come, to like we have so much more water than anybody ever thinks and we're just fine. And I fall somewhere in the middle, like you kind of mentioned, and I would love to be proven wrong. If the study came back and they were like, you have so much water, it's unbelievable, I would be like, woohoo, let's go. But at the same time, I still would advocate for water saving initiatives. Because even if it turned out we had 500,000 acre feet of water that we had accessible and rights to, I would still want to save what we could because it's prudent. It's the idea of like doing more with less. Like whether or not we have so much water it's not even funny, or whether or not we are already needing to save, it's still like it's like the concept of winning the lottery, right? If we find out we have 500,000 acre feet, just like a lottery winner gets a heap of money.
But I'm gonna want to enjoy that money. I want a fountain. Like that's what I
see. And I'm like, we don't blow it on sports cars and on nonsense. Like
I would blow it.
We spend it on things that benefit us. We invest it in the community. We make sure that like, I mean, maybe some green grass is an investment. Maybe that fountain would attract people from around the world, like the Bellagio in Vegas. But
we collect all the pennies as extra tax.
But the people pitching the fountain. But basically, for me, it's like regardless of what we find out we have, we make sure that it's used as an investment in the community and as an investment in the future of the community.
Yeah. Cool. Where are we at on time?
8 minutes.
8 minutes.
Oh, good. Yeah.
You know, the thing, you know, where you're talking about where you have a lot of faith in like institutions, right? Like you were talking about, well, you ask your doctor, you know, and not the internet. And I think one of the backdrops of this, I want to zoom out because I was saying about how we kind of like, we look at Moab as Aspen as maybe a precursor to Moab, and Moab maybe a precursor to Monticello, in this general like Western, like there's this idea of Western towns getting, turning into kind of like recreational spots.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I think about, the whole country is moving, and I think about where Moab is in the aspect of the whole country, because I'm from Ohio and land prices were always inexpensive, but my mom was like, oh my God, real estate's just kind of like blown up. They're starting to have like housing issues in Ohio. And then, you know, we touched on like, you know, this is like a national issue, and then these issues of like, well, I don't know, do people trust their doctors now? right? And it's like we're going through a time where trust in institutions is being questioned, which I think is good. Like, I think we should be questioning a lot of things. Like, it's kind of funny. 20 years ago, I might have been more of like the anti-vax side of things. I mean, I didn't vaccinate my daughter until she got Russian measles. Like, she got a case, and then I told my wife, I was like, oh my God, I cannot. I mean, my dad had polio. And then I started being like, okay, we need to like seriously think about like vaccinations and stuff like that. I don't want to get into this thing, but what I guess the overdrop is like the whole country's having these wealth distribution problems. We're all having like questions about institutional trust, and it's like where do you see is your, like, I see your age bracket, is kind of coming into their political, like, you're a young councilman or hope to be councilman.
We've got another, actual young councilwoman elected.
Yeah. I mean, Luke, you kind of like running for Luke's spot.
We got Caitlin. Like,
I mean, he has a kid. I'm kind of like, oh my God, if I was younger, would I want to have children? Kind of thing.
And so, like, to kind of address all of that, so I think there's two things. So one, I think some of it is trust in the institution, and some of it is trust in the people in the institution. Like, as you talked about going to those water meetings, talking to one of the scientists, and him saying essentially like, I have no horse in this race. That like this is just what the data says. Going to trust in your doctor. Like, as institutions of any size grow, there will be fallacies within the institution. It's like a margin of error thing where everything from the human element of error to the actual like measurement element of error, like if you like take a small population of people with a couple caregivers, they're going to get really consistent care and everything's going to be about the same. And if you blow that up to a national scale, there are absolutely going to be like bad doctors out there and bad scientists out there and people skewing information for their own gains.
Well, also like information can just be wrong.
And and exactly. So there can be that like that element of like malice, but there can also just be like, oh yeah, the tools they were using, that scale they were using during the measurement process was incorrect and it skewed all of their research.
I go on, I'm like, what else do we have to go on?
And so,
right?
well, and this is kind of where I'm getting at in two respects. It's like, one, I know enough to know what I don't know. So you go into vaccines, and right, like, so I was on a medical path, like, before I decided to leave school and, like, do my thing, and I have a small understanding of that kind of science, essentially, and I know enough about it to know that I, as Miles Loftin, who I am, I don't understand enough about epidemiology and about the creation of vaccines to make a critical decision about whether or not, like, a vaccine is good or bad myself.
Right.
And that at some point you have to trust somebody who has dedicated their life to studying these things to make that decision. Because if you are trying to willy-nilly make your decisions and go like, oh yeah, like, I think this is bad based off of this, these series of Google searches I did, like, the chances that you're going to get that right often enough seem to me to be very low. Mm-hmm. And so it's one of those things where it is unfortunate that our institutions and that, like, it's unfortunate that it's hard to trust your doctor, but at the same time, unless you go to medical school, you really aren't qualified to be making that decision. Like, you can make a decision, like, we live in a free country, you are allowed to make that decision, but when it comes down to, like, and that was what that piece was, the death of expertise. When it comes down to it, like, when you do not have a proper education on a subject, which doesn't always have to come from an educational institution, right? Like, you don't necessarily have to be a college graduate to be, like, you don't necessarily have to be a college graduate in law to pass the bar, but it really helps, And it's one of those where, like, you do at some point have to understand the limitations of your own education and your own ability to sift through all of the information presented to you and make a decision that is actually factually accurate. And I think one of the big things in this age of misinformation, and like this may rub some people the wrong way, but we'll go for it. One of the big things in this age of misinformation that is really a struggle is facts are still facts. Like, the beautiful thing about science at the end of the day is that it is the best that we can understand and measure, and peer-reviewed papers are taken as fact for a reason. And it means that somebody did something, they came up with a hypothesis, they tested that hypothesis, they came up with these test results, they wrote a paper that is wordy and hard to understand, but other people in that field took that paper and they repeated those experiments, and when all that works out...
Oh, okay.
Well,
yeah. When all that works out, that's what creates a fact. And no matter how you skew things, at some point, facts are facts.
Laws. So, biggest problem in our country. You just were saying off camera. We got into it.
Biggest problem in our country, education.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that's what creates the distrust. I think that's what creates the death of expertise, is when you feel like those in power that created these institutions in our country are deceiving you, but you don't have the expertise to differentiate between what is fact and what is fiction.
Okay.
And
because we were kind of saying off camera, what I was getting at is that I think a part of like Trumpism and a part of like the populist revolt that kind of turned to the right, and there's a populist revolt on the left too, is these experts that run our institutions have also created huge wealth inequalities. We have problems with our country, we shipped all your jobs. Neoliberalism said, Mexico's better at making cars, China's better at making, cheap plastic crap.
yeah.
And so you should go into coding. But people didn't go into coding. They instead got poor. And they were like, these experts, these nice, again, my uncle was a UAW union guy,
Mm-hmm.
and he was just like Bill Clinton, a liberal Senate or a Democratic Senate, Democratic House, just shipped my job away. And like, there's the story of like why working class men voted for Trump.
Yeah.
And my cousin makes less than my uncle did in like not even in adjusted for inflation money, but in today's wages, he makes less today than my uncle did in the 80s.
Yeah.
And so I'm just kind of like, this is what trust in your institutions have brought you.
Well,
and so I'm like, I'm in for the, like, I get it. I get all that, but I also see this is what's playing out in the country.
Well, and that's why it makes it such a complex issue. Because on the one hand, like, you don't know what you don't know, and people who spend their whole life studying a subject are likely better at making a decision in regards to that subject than you are with whatever information you can access, particularly if you're not able to differentiate between what is accurate and what is inaccurate, because that's hard enough for the professionals to do, much less for us to do. And I do think like education, a lack of it, and a lack of access to it is what drives all of that. I think if we want to get into the conspiracy theory world of that, like, I think that the lack of education is almost deliberate. Right? Like, there are other developed nations that provide college education for free. Ours puts people in massive amounts of debt. I think that is in order to kind of leverage who gets education when they get it.
How are we going to pay for the bombs, Miles? That's the question. So, okay, any last things, you got questions, for me, or do you have, any last statements you want to make?
This was an interesting conversation. It's funny. I feel like we talked more about politics as a whole versus like a lot of our local issues. But I did get to touch on some of the things I care about, and I think for me, it has been an interesting time entering the world of Moab local politics.
Oh yeah,
and I think what I appreciate about it And like, it's funny. So our community is just really involved.
Yeah.
And I really, really enjoy the fact that,
And
like,
for being involved too, like the fact that just me or you could get involved. Like
Yeah.
when I grew up in Ohio, I don't even know who's involved.
well, same thing.
Yeah.
I like growing up in Albuquerque. City government might as well have been the state or the Fed. Like,
Yeah.
just like for a normal average
Unaccessible.
Joe, there was absolutely no chance of involving yourself in it. And that is also part of why I did this. Is because like, the fact that it's accessible, the fact that somebody who's just a guy in the community can step up and help lead the community is important to me. And you know, like, the more time I spend with people, the more jobs I go on, whether you're just kind of hanging out after the job with the homeowner talking about whatever's going on in their life, or whether you're fixing something that's a deliberate problem in their life, whether they're complaining about how the city stymied them on X, Y, and Z on their property, and you know how they wish they had more property rights, which is something like, there's another one I thought the Republican Party would like me for is an interest in some amount of deregulation and property rights in town. You know, there's a lot of there's a fair chunk of city code that feels more like it belongs in an HOA than it does in
Funny.
a city code book.
Yeah. From my cold dead hands, my AstroTurf in the front yard.
Yeah, right. You know, but like, you know, it's one of those things where it's honestly been a pleasure to get to know the community in this way. Like, I always kind of lived in my little 500 person bubble, the way you described it. And I've spent, you know, like, first it was the job that pulled me out of that bubble. Now it's the campaign that's pulled me out of that bubble. And it's really helped me understand the length and breadth of what people are facing here, of what people care about here.
Yeah, what was some surprises? Because I always talk, like, when I went into plumbing, I went from working at kind of that bike shop where I'd like, oh, everybody's 30, 40-ish, and they ride mountain bikes, to being like, oh, this community's quote-unquote diverse. Like, I didn't realize how many old retired miners were here. You know, like, what was some of the shock, like, what's a shock to you? Or
I don't know if there are, like, I don't know if there are shocks that are that broad. Like, there's funny things like learning how many people care about the skate park. Like, I have had many people walk up to me and talk about that specifically. Not about our parks as a whole or whatever, but the skate park. Okay. You know, I think one of the groups of people that I, like, learned a lot from was parents, right? Like, I don't have a kid. And I had always, like, you know, thought about what it would take to raise a kid in this community and all that, but, like, it's very interesting to get the feedback from parents in the community and how, like, what they want to preserve about this community. You know, we, like, something I've always loved about Moab is just how safe it feels here, right? Like, the amount of jobs we go to where somebody says, like, oh yeah, I won't be home, like, the front door's unlocked, just go on in and take care of things. Like, that is not something I'm used to in Albuquerque, where I moved from. You know, like, that is something that is unique and beautiful to this town. And in the same way that, like, letting your kids walk to school was not a thing in Albuquerque.
Oh, funny, huh?
But it's such a thing here.
Yeah.
And those kids have, like, more independence because they're able to walk to and from school and, like, all this kind of stuff. And it's cool. It's cool hearing those perspectives, and I've learned a lot about, like, what people in the community are really looking for, what they are looking towards, how they want to see the community grow. And so, like, outside of our, like, whole conversation about global politics or otherwise, like, the reason I wish, you know, people from either side of the political aisle reached out to me, the reason I think I can represent people from either side of the political aisle in our community is because the things I care about are things that support all of us, whether that's, like, you know, people's housing, the people's welfare, the welfare of their children, you know, the supporting a thriving economy here in town, and supporting, you know, small businesses like our own. You know, like, I think what makes Moab unique is how many small businesses we have in town, is our sense of entrepreneurship. You know, like, there are a lot of people who have gone out on a limb to start something and build something in our community, and it's those businesses like ours, like others, that fuel our economy and fuel our town, and it's a special thing. And so I hope to preserve that, and I hope to make sure that like this is still a place where somebody, you know, can have that Moab dream, you know, or as Howard put it, the magic of Moab. And I think unfortunately the magic of Moab isn't always just not paying a property tax, but it's the fact that somebody can come here for the beautiful landscape we have around us, and if they want it, they can build a life here.
Yeah.
They can raise their kids here, they can create a business here, and they can become part of what is a vibrant and varied community, from the old retired miners to the cowboys to the folks in construction to the people, you know, the entrepreneurs, the small business owners, the, you know, we've got quite a mix, and we're lucky for it.
Yep.
And I think that's the key is you don't want to support one group over the other. You want to kind of foster the entirety of the community, because
in a functional society.
That's what makes our community great.
Right. All right, cool. We're actually going to go off pandering to the pickleball people. So
That's true.
Let's go.
We're going to see how bad Miles is at pickleball.